Alright, I had such a fun time doing that photo stamping project in my last video, and I have another photo here. And this one, again, is from Walgreens. I don't know. Just if you have a lot of these photographs, it's just one of the things that's just easiest to do is just to have it printed out at your local, I don't know, 1 hour photo place if they still have those. They don't have them where they develop film, but you can certainly have your digital prints printed out. And if you're getting like 10 of these or something like that, they're usually very inexpensive, and it would probably cost less than to print these out with your toner, unless you have one of those tank style toner printers or inkjet printers or whatever they're called. All right, now I'm going to stamp out a scene that's really similar to the previous one, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if this paper will take some additional embellishment in the form of some pigment inks over the top. I'm guessing it will because glossy paper does, but I'm not quite sure. But I thought I'd try some light beams on here. Alright, so I'm going, again, if you didn't see that last video, I'm going with some kind of the more solid styles of images. If I have anything that's too wide open, like say, like a cabin or a structure or something like that, and if I stamp it down on top of that, this cloud and, you know, the skies are going to be showing through. But if you have imagery that's fairly solid in nature, you know, you don't have to worry about that see-through factor. I'll have to worry, you know, I'll see it showing in these rocks over here because I have some open area, but that usually just, I don't know, it usually just looks like something like shadows or whatnot, and it does make sense within the context of this, you know, the overall kind of lighting scheme in here, as well as the imagery in here. It's fine to have, you know, some darker images and some changes in value across these rocks, you know, just depending on what's going on in the sky. So images like that just work out just fine. Okay. Giving credit to the, you know, the person that kind of invented photo stamping. It's Rand Curry, I believe. And don't know if he's still stamping these days or what, but this is way back when, in the mid-90s, I would say, 94 or 5, I'm guessing, is when I first saw that being done. Okay, so I stamped that there. I'm going to take the previous one I just stamped, the larger. I'm thinking about doing that again. Maybe that would look better if I stamped it on both sides like this. The previous one I had this all shifted over. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do these light beams coming out of here. And, alright, let me do the larger one. I think this would be a little bit more dramatic with these larger trees on each side. And that's what this design does for this image right here. It creates kind of additional dimension and kind of extends the field of view within a piece. Okay, now I'm overlapping the previous design by about 1/4 inch or so. You can do it up to 1/2 inch or so. And that's where masking and whatnot, I try to eliminate the need for careful masking with all Stampscapes images. I figured, you know, for me, the less kind of tedium I have to do, the more enjoyable the experience is in terms of the process of using them. So just wherever I can, I build this overlapping concept and ability into the design itself, okay? So, we have something like that. We have these larger trees right here and the smaller ones in the background now. So now we have foreground and kind of midground, I guess you can call the clouds and whatnot. The background or skies, sometimes it just depends on what you're talking about in terms of imagery. Sometimes, you know, the imagery is the background. You can just call the sky. So, anyway. Okay, so we have that. Now, one of the things that I felt that photo stamping kind of needs after you stamp something out like that is to ground the imagery, to work it into the piece. Right now, I tend to think that the imagery is floating a little bit, okay? And it doesn't have very much body and mass. So if we color in some of the imagery, now it's hard to tell because it's really busy in here right now with all that background showing through, but let's just reference these designs so we can see. All right, now you can see where there are lighter areas in the rocks and darker areas, right? You typically on the bottom, or the bottom half of the rock at least, is usually darker than the top. Now, that's all you need to know. You don't have to know it, actually. All you have to do is see it. So what I'm going to do is, with a pen that's just about as dark as that rock, I will go in. This is just an alcohol pen, okay? And I'm just coloring right on here. And one of the really nice things that I found when doing that last photo stamping, I haven't done a photo stamping in years and years and years, but one of the things I found was that real dye-based ink, and that was just plain dye-based Marvy ink right here, just black, okay? That ink really dries fast on here, so... And this is alcohol ink, so it's not making it's not smearing my black imagery. Not that I could tell, at least, and if I can't tell, that's good enough for me. If it's kind of, you know, putting some of the inks back into solution kind of on a really microscopic level or something like that, then so be it. You know, if you can't tell, you can't tell, and it's not going to matter. Alright, so I'm putting some ink down at the base of my rocks, and kind of midway up or so. And you don't always have to just go, I mean, I'm going with gray right here, but you can mix it up a little bit, you know. Let's try a jungle green or something like that, okay? Maybe there's some moss or something growing on these rocks right here. It adds a little bit of a different hue into the mix, and maybe where we're coloring it, you know, they have those little grassy reeds at the base of my rocks as well in the drawing, so, you know, that looks pretty good in terms of that type of addition, that type of hue addition. Alright, so I don't know if you can tell, it's fairly subtle because it's about the same value as the color I've already laid down. Now, one of the things I like to do is I like to bring in additional lighter tones after I go dark with my darker pens, and I like to just kind of blend that out. So here's some blue, and of course blue is within the photograph coloring, so this kind of reiterates what's going on in the sky. It's like photo tinting, you know. I doubt if any of us ever did it. I was in a lot of photo classes, and I never did it, you know, myself. But the photo tints, when people used to colorize photographs, the tints were typically very light versions of whatever hue they were, and a lot of times they were the primaries, so you can kind of mix your, you know, your secondary colors, you know, so... anyways, but those blues and things like that, they were typically, well, I don't know if they were even that dark. They were somewhere in between, like this one and this one, so that you wouldn't be altering too much the value scheme of a piece. You would just be kind of adding color to it, but you wouldn't be making something darker or lighter. So they tried to minimize that type of impact in terms of value, and so you can just add a little bit of color to it. So anyways, I'm just kind of streaking in some little additional tones in my water as well. But I don't know if that looks like kind of the things are a little bit more anchored. To me, it's subtle. It's supposed to be subtle. I don't want it to go too harsh. Let's go back to this. I don't think I use this. Is this the same gray? I'm not sure. Alright, so I'm going in the shadows a little bit more. Maybe I can stand to use a little bit more. When you're doing this with alcohol inks, and if you start layering it, what happens is sometimes it's harder to kind of add more because you're going into a previously colored area that has alcohol that will go back into solution when you go over it again. It's like using a blender pen or something like that. You know, it kind of melts. It's not melting, but it's just putting the ink back into solution, and sometimes you end up removing ink. But that's good though, because you can really manipulate it and control it that way. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a lot of this little scumbling kind of area right around these rocks, right at the base of them, to really kind of reinforce the shadows down there. So see that harsher line right there? I feel like it's really anchoring everything into place more. Maybe I can darken in this whole area. I see these shadows going down here that are on the design. Okay, so what it would look like if I were doing this on a white piece of paper or something like that, where you can tell is I'm going down like this and just coloring in these extra shadows. Okay, and I started it off with a lighter tone too, just to kind of ease into it rather than getting anything too harsh. But like I said, if you get something really harsh, like, oh my gosh, that's just too dark, then just take your blender pen or a lighter version of whatever color you're using, just go back in and you can kind of just remove it right out. Alright, so that looks okay to me. Now, let's play around here, actually. This is a really light green. I just wanted to get a little bit more bold with my use of additional media on this scene. The previous one, I was just kind of testing things out, and I was pretty conservative with my use of media over the top of it. I just put in a little bit of shading. So look at that little bit of green in there. Isn't that kind of nice? But I don't know, it blended in pretty good. But let me take my blender and I'll kind of just blend that out just a touch. I didn't really need to do it too much because there's really not any harsh line there, but I just kind of dab back into that. And it's doing that thing with alcohol inks. It kind of separates a little bit when you put a dab of this blender fluid down. It kind of starts spreading out, and if there's ink there, it kind of leaves that puddle. But that texturing can look pretty cool, and I would suggest playing around with it a little bit. So here I'm going into the water, and it's lifting some of that ink that I've already laid down, but let's do that in this lighter area then, so we can get kind of a combination of light and dark within that space. Alright, so that looks good so far, I would say. Alcohol inks are really fun to do. You can use water-based inks as well if you have like La Plumes or Tombows or something like that. I would suggest going in with lighter tones. You wouldn't be able to manipulate it properly as much because I think it would be hard set, just like this imagery was hard set right after stamping it out. But just start with your lighter tones and work into the darker tones if you want to, and just kind of play around with it and see where it goes. Okay, so let's see what this looks like with some of these light beams. So I'm going to try to make some light beams coming across this and see what that looks like. It might look kind of weird, but you know, we're playing around and experimenting, so let's see how it goes. Alright, so I'm just going to take a piece of paper like this, and I want these straight edges like this, okay? So we're going to make some light beams coming out from some area. And I'm just going to stick with this lighter area. I figured the lightest area in here, right here, would be the place where some beams would be kind of emanating from. So I mean, this right now is being top lit, okay? The sun's probably out here somewhere, all right? And it's shining down in here. But I'm just going to transform it where it looks like these clouds are being backlit with some light beams coming out that way. Just because that's the easiest. I don't want to have the light beams coming from above like this. I mean, you could, but I thought it would be kind of cool if it was emanating from somewhere. All right, so when you do something like this, you just kind of pick a focal point for the beams to be coming from. Let's say I'll do it right from, I don't know, you can just kind of pick wherever, but I'll pick maybe the top of this tree right here, or one of these trees, okay? So I'll just pick right there, and I'll show you how I utilize that positioning, okay? Let's just apply it with a stylus tool here. This pigment ink. This is just your Hero Arts regular pigment ink, white pigment ink. Not all pigment inks are the same, probably, but most of them are. Alright. Brilliance dries really fast, and but most of them are kind of the same or similar compositions, so I don't know, just try whatever one you have. Alright, I was going to go from the top of that tree, but now let's do that, yeah. Okay, so I'll go with something like this. I keep losing my tree because I'm covering it. Oh, gosh. Okay, so this is what this looks like. It's just a little peekaboo thing. So you see we're having kind of that similar, you know, destination point of the paper is important. So you can kind of build out that beam in perspective. It's, you know, it's widening like that. So the farther away you get, you know, it goes back into that perspective. Alright, oh, that is sticking at that really easy, okay? Boy, that's going on there really good. I don't know, it shows up more on that. Maybe because it was, you know, kind of a darker blue. Looks like a spotlight right now, huh? It's almost too harsh. Okay, let me see, where was that? What tree was I using there? Okay. Alright. Let's see, let's go. Boy, that sure doesn't look like it's going back to that tree. Or was it? No, it was. It doesn't look like it because it disappears in the clouds. So it's kind of hard to tell. Alright. There we go. This is an easy process. Just start down here and kind of work. Now, I almost used too much in that last one. Let me go a little bit less, and I'll kind of curtain it. Meaning, I'll go a little bit more on this side and let it kind of taper off on this side. I think that might look better. Okay, like that. Yeah, it kind of tapers. This is too much right here. Let me see just how kind of user-friendly this this is. Let me see if I can kind of dab off some of this. Oh yeah, it's working beautifully. It's not coming off so easy where it just kind of wipes off clean, but I'm dabbing it off, and see, the more I dab it off, the more translucent it becomes, and, you know, the see-through, okay? It is see-through already. It was never opaque, but yeah, look at that. Alright, so I should change the exposure of this camera. Let's go with another one right here. Now this is working really fast, so... And I find, here's what I would do. I would just put less ink on here in the future and go with kind of more of this, like this version right here. It's really, really light on here. You don't need these these sponges or anything. Like, you sponge in with whatever you want. Okay. All right. So that is going like that. Let's put one over here, using the same kind of focal point. And I tell you what. Let's do this. You see these clouds right here? I'm going to try to have the beam coming from behind this lighter cloud right here and in front of these ones. Okay. So you'll give a little bit of, I don't know, kind of spatial dimension to those beams. Alright. Okay, like that. See, it's really pale right over here. Maybe it's too pale. Let me go in here again like this. Let me just use one side of this, actually. I'm stamping it mostly on the paper. Oops, maybe I do need to cover this up like this. It's such a really tiny beam area that I'm working in. Okay, here we go. I want to taper it even more, like that. It's a little bit too bright, so, or light, so. And let me take it out from behind those trees too. I don't want it on those trees, but let's dampen it down a little bit. Like, yeah, looks pretty good. Now these beams will dry, I think, darker than what they look like right now. But see that little subtle one? Let's put another one up here. And we'll keep this. We'll try to go a little bit more subtle. I'm getting the feel of it as I do this. Okay, I haven't tried this before on this kind of paper at all, so learning kind of on the spot. Okay, so okay, now this is like the perfect. This is really dry on here, so that's what I'd recommend, I guess. Now, I'll know that for the future. Okay, so here we have these beams coming out like so. That looks okay. Do we need another one in here? No, let's not do that. Let's do something here. It just occurred to me. Let's play around with some additional ink like so. The thing is rendering beautifully, so. It's coming into form really nicely, so I don't know. Photopaper takes the ink really good so far, in terms of what I'm using it for, at least. But isn't that cool? Like that? Alright, so let's do something right here. We have all these clouds, and some of them are dark, which we want. But let's kind of bring a little bit more of this haze and whatnot, these beams. Okay, so if these beams are there, it means there's kind of this moisture probably in the air, but that's being illuminated by these beams of light, right? So anyways, let's see if we can add some additional kind of lighter areas with some additional pigment ink like this. So see this right here? I'm just doing a very light. You have to keep it light, otherwise it's going to be real blobby. But see that little change of hue right there? Change of value. I'm just going into that cloud and I'm adding this little touch of very dry pigment ink added in here like that. Okay, so I'm kind of making these clouds bottom lit. This is kind of cool. It's kind of like I feel like I'm coloring or something like that, except you're not. I mean, this is an additive process, but it feels more like I'm doing a subtractive process in that, I'm revealing light instead of just going on there with the dark. Okay, see that right there? That little haze right there? Isn't that fun? Let's do the same thing over here. Let's illuminate some of these clouds that are being hit by light beams. The light beams to me look pretty cool, but they stand out in terms of a kind of a really different textural quality than what's in the rest of the scene. So I'm adding a little bit of that same medium to the pieces so that it just incorporates in with the piece a little bit more and doesn't look so foreign, like a foreign substance kind of added in there. So adding some of this in here like that. Boy, that looks really fun. Okay, so let's add it around this and kind of soften up some of these harsh edges of the beams that I just added in there, like so. Okay. Let's illuminate that little straggler right there. And see those little clouds, those little bits hanging out there? I'm just kind of illuminating some of those like that. Doesn't it look like the light is hitting them now? Let's really light this area. And another thing to explore, I think, I completely forgot why, what I was doing before I started doing that other photo stamping piece the other day, and I'm supposed to be kind of organizing my studio and tidying it up. I don't know how many of these prints I have, though. I'll have to get some more prints, but on my Flickr page, I think it's in the description below these videos, I have in one of my albums, I think it's just called Photostamping Skies or something like that, or Clouds, and I mean there's a lot of better photographs out there, you know, on Flickr and other sites like that, but you can just download and print out, you know, sky things, sunsets and whatnot. But I do have some that I took myself, and they're up there and they're free for download and printing or whatever you want to do with them if you want. But look at that, that is really fun. Now, anytime anyone ever does this type of technique with pigment ink, they use too much ink and they get blobs everywhere, and it happens almost every time, even if I say it, and it happens to me too. So it just, you really have to take off a lot of the ink, and you don't have to re-ink it very much, but just kind of tap this down, don't smash it down. And when you have very little ink on here, what happens is people, they go like that, and there's nothing showing because they took off most of the ink, but it's all about this kind of repetitive kind of tapping motion, right? And it builds up really slowly and softly, where it's just, you're building up. Imagine, just think of it like just think about what you're trying to do. You're trying to introduce light into an area, okay? It's like you're turning on the light. Think about it in terms of a knob from 1 to 100 or something like that. You want those first every little tap is like taking it from like one notch. So it's going from 100, which is black or whatever, and you're taking it to 99, 98, 97, 96, or something like that, right? And we're only taking it down to about 90 or so. I don't know. Maybe that was a bad analogy. Think about 1,000, you know, or something like that. So it's 999, 998, or something like that. And the more tappings it kind of takes you, the more control you have over it, right? Because it's ever slowly turning on the light in that area. So we can see these bottom lit clouds. Now, see where I've added it? It's just a really light, very soft haze there. Look at that lighting in there, though, on those clouds. And this paper is working beautifully for it. So I don't know. You wouldn't think that photo paper would do that, but yeah, I don't know. It's taken it really nicely, and it really dries fast too. I guess it's the emulsion coating on here, I guess, maybe. That, you know, when you're printing out something at home too, if it's the same type of paper that they use kind of in a professional printer area, they don't want those prints to be taking a long time to dry, so I guess that it's probably some kind of faster drying type of chemistry to it. You know, after all, 1 hour photo, right? They don't want a bunch of prints sitting around having to dry before they pack them away into those packs. And they don't want them all stuck together either, so. Alright, but anyways, that is way too much fun. Look at that drama that we can add to the clouds. This is a whole new avenue. I mean, I don't want to spend the next, 30 scenes that I do working on photographs, but I don't know, it's going to have to be in there somewhere, because that looks really fun. See, that was always the thing. I didn't like some of the things with photos, because you're stuck, with a set thing in the background. But if we can manipulate it like this, I mean, the possibilities are kind of wide open. And, I think we can tint these too before, the pigment ink. We should be able to color them and whatnot. All right, let's add some of this kind of misty fog in the water as well. Okay, but actually, let's hold on there. That looks really good up there too. Okay, So let's add some of that reflective quality down here. See how light it is up here? And it stands to reason. I mean, this isn't exactly a mirrored image or anything like that, but who cares? I think it looks really good. Sometimes people say, hey, that's not the cloud up there, but you know what I say to that? I just say, hey, you know, it looks interesting to me, and that's the only thing that I really care about. Not realism or something like that. I mean, I don't want it to look real fake or anything like that, but those types of issues aren't a factor for me. It's like, you know, sometimes I do these like kind of like mirrored type of things, like a cloud up here with the moon, and I just stamp it again down there. I don't want to go through the process of a mirror image stamp, you know. Other people do that, but they're not as lazy as I am, you know. So yeah, it's that's not a, you know, something like this mirrored type of thing up there is not a factor for me. So anyways, kind of adding that, some of that down like that. It doesn't look, you know, when you start adding it like this, I'm finding that it becomes, this area up here, it almost looks like something that's been painted. I almost see pigment ink as like a paint in itself, you know, it's kind of thick. So this, to me, is looking a little bit more painterly and directed, you know what I mean? Directed in terms of, you know, if you're painting something by hand or whatever, you have a lot of control over anything that you want to state. So in here, as far as these light beams go, I'm really controlling the lighting on here. So it's a little bit more directed, you know, I'm putting the, you know, these clouds illuminated, are now illuminated by the beams that have been added in there, as opposed to just having to get, you know, well, that cloud, you know, that photo is what it is back there, and that's it. You know, you just have to stamp it over in black, and that's it, you know. Well, I guess it's not it anymore with this. Anyways, but you see, I'm kind of adding this texture down here, so you have this added texture down in the water, or just in another area you're seeing. If you had a cabin or something like that, wouldn't it be cool to have that smoke coming out of that? But see, now the base of the scene from a textural standpoint is, you see that little haze right there? I mean, it represents something else. It represents kind of, well, it's still moisture, but it relates to the top a little bit more. And doing something like this kind of, it envelops your imagery in this kind of suspended material and makes the scene a little bit more universal. All right, on the sides of some of these trees, what I'm going to do, on the sides of the trees closest to my light, I'm just going to put a little bit of pigment ink over the top of these, so it kind of turns them in space, you might say. It makes them seem a little bit more round because we're saying the light is hitting them, you know, and it's affecting the value of it. So over here I can put a little bit of this illumination on the side of the trees facing the light. I'll tell you what, see, and back in here too, let's push the depth. Let's just put these trees right here in a little bit of haze, you know, so it looks like they're farther back in the distance because they are lighter. Okay. All right. This, to me, is really spectacular up here. It didn't look good, you know, just the beams, but now this is really kind of making more sense, you know, in terms of a lighting scheme. Okay, so I'm going a little bit more bold. Sometimes I'm a little bit too conservative in terms of my usage of some things, especially if I'm just kind of experimenting around with something for the first time. But like in the last piece, I was thinking, I should have gone a little bit darker in my shadows and whatnot, which I can still do, but I don't know. Just like someone was asking me before, do you put your stuff on display or do you ever frame it? But when I move on from a scene, I don't know, it's usually, that's it. Unless I don't like it, then I'll do those videos where I'm kind of resurrecting something and improving it. But I don't know, I'm kind of on to the next thing, and it's always, because there's always something more to learn and play around with. It's just, it's never ending, the things that we can do with stamping and whatnot, and the media that's out there. I mean, this is a really old technique, but I don't know, I mean, it took me a while to kind of get around to it. I haven't done it too much, but I didn't really think about doing these other things on there. All right, so let's see right here. Let's go in here, and I didn't add any highlights in my last piece, okay? So let's go in with just our gel pen like we do on glossy oftentimes, and let's add a little bit of lighting on tops of some of these rocks. We added shadows in darker areas, okay? With our alcohol pens, right? So you can see that areas on the tops of these rocks are light, right? So you go dark in the darks and light on the lights. Don't fill it all in, I mean, if you filled it all in, it would look like snow or something like that. So all I'm doing is I'm just kind of rounding it off a little bit. You see, like that? With a couple little dots like that on the top. Now, I might put a little bit more where it's light, although it's not really light down there at all. So, but if it was lighter, I can use more of these highlights. Okay, but see, doesn't that make things look a little bit more dimensional? Don't they look a little bit more 3D by doing this? You're kind of introducing lighting. You don't have to know about lighting, just look at the designs, okay? And see where there's lighter areas on them, okay? Or, if you don't have this wood mounted, you can just print it out and take a look. But you can see it on here, though. All right, now let's do the same thing. You see these clouds right here? Where is it lighter? Well, it's wherever you added that pigment ink for the most part, but let's kind of go in here and maybe add a few little highlights. They say that, silver, lining or whatever. And it's usually what they're talking about is kind of this lit area, right, where it's kind of capturing the light. All right, those are really subtle because it's really soft in there. I don't want to add too much, but this is a lighter area in here, so you can add a little bit more. So it's just kind of a real subtle texture in there. Okay, light is coming from this side, so I'm going to illuminate that side of the cloud. We'll have to take another print like this and really tone it over and just stamp these on top and have a nighttime type of scene, and we'll add these little dots in for stars and whatnot. You needed to get something at Walgreens anyway, right? I'm joking. That's where this was printed out again. But, I don't know. What is it? Costco's... Was it 40 cents? I don't know. What was it? 40 cents a print or something like that? I thought it was less. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. But by the way, this is a 4x6 print. Can you imagine at 8.5 by 11 or something? 8 by 10 or whatever it is? Okay, wow. That looks like a painting to me. And what is this? We're at the 39-minute mark. And hey, I'm just kind of... I've never done that before. So, I mean, something like this could probably take a lot less time. You know, I was kind of just trying to feel my way through this one, but I mean, I've done those beams before, but not on something like this, so I had no idea what it would look like. But I am really happy with what's going on up here in terms of that pigmenting. Now, where I thought it would work out probably is in the lighter areas, but what I didn't anticipate was that pigmenting, like on the bottom darker area of that cloud, or right over here, right in here, just dabbing in. Remember, you have to kind of dry brush it in. Don't put a big blob on there. Do it where you're really having to build it up. And no one takes off enough of that paint when they first do it. So take off a lot more than you think. If you start dabbing it down and nothing's coming off, that's a little bit closer to what you want than, you know, too much. And like I said, that buffed off a little, you know, pretty good to me. I think if I went really hard on it, I could remove those beams completely. I'm not quite sure, though. It's kind of worked into the emulsion, but I can lighten them quite a bit. So anyways, okay, so that, I mean, that photo wasn't really terribly dynamic, but I mean, just the ability to go back in and really push the values in there, in terms of, you know, bringing out that lightness, really brought it together. Pigment ink all over my imagery here worked out really well, and just a lot of fun. So I'd recommend it. I'm recommending it for myself too, in terms of you know, additional play time and experimentation. If you have any questions, I don't know if I can answer them in here because what you saw is what you got. I'm not an authority on it, but just someone just figuring it out for myself. So I don't know. I want to play around with some additional tones in here, and maybe we can paint some additional colors into it and introduce like reds or pinks or something like that into kind of more of a neutral white cloud structure, and then go back into it with some additional tones. So I think that would add an additional avenue for this type of technique. And it's one of those fastest ones because you have kind of your background already hard set. So hard set in terms of the structure and foundation, but you know, we can manipulate it once it's been laid down, and that's the ultimate thing for any paper crafter or crafters. You want to be able to influence you know, your pieces along in the process. So anyways, thanks again for watching, and if you like this video, I hope you like, share, and subscribe.